Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Coaching from the Couch. This is your Washington Commanders update, and I'm your host, Candi CWall Waller, checking in from Bowie Television as I always do to give you the latest and greatest information on the Washington Commanders. We are live. I've so far been doing some of these recaps and updates live. So want to see how this works out. So if you're jumping on to the live version from the Bowie TV YouTube channel, make sure you hit the thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed. You can absolutely share the link with your Washington Commanders loving family and friends. If you're joining from Facebook, I'd prefer you hit love, but like it's cool too. But you can definitely share this show again with your Washington Commanders loving family and friends. If you're watching on television, Verizon Channel 11, Comcast Xfinity Channel 77, hello to you. And try not to throw anything at the TV, at least not this week, hopefully, right? Because it is, in fact, a victory Monday. I know it may not feel like a victory Monday, but it is. All right, it is. It absolutely is. So we have to, I guess, not be too negative. And while you're all popping in, make sure you say hello to Mama Waller and Pops Waller. Guess what? He may sometimes jump in later on, but make sure you say hello to Pops Waller as well. Say hello to my godmother, say hello to her. And I see that folks are jumping on. James Roundtree, make sure you share the show. I see Caesar has jumped on. You all, we have to get into this. We have to get into it because there's just so much to discuss. I had quite a bit of content last week, so I've kind of pulled all of it together because I'm actually going to, pull some receipts from last week so that we can see, well, what happened? Did anybody see any progress in some of these areas? Let's get into the nitty gritty, if you will, on all the things. Of course, as always, I love to see you all's comments. I will definitely try to place as many as I possibly can onto the screen. As always, questions. I will try to get to as many questions as possible. So again, make sure you're sharing, love, like, make sure you're subscribed, all of those good things. And we can go ahead and just start it from the top. So what I figured out, because hey, at this point, go ahead, if you have been watching the show and if you have been tracking my posts on Facebook or on X, drop in the chat some of the things that I have shared with you all previously to look out for. Now I have a thing. I'm starting to pull receipts. Receipts, everyone knows what a receipt is. Receipts are when you have to go back and say, I remember when you got this. I remember when this came up. I remember when that came up. So, Commanders fans, if you've been watching and checking in, make sure you drop in the chat some of the things that you all have heard me talk about since OTAs, since training camp. And now you're starting to see them in real time on game day. And you say to yourself, CWall said, and then here we all are. Let me get into this first and foremost. I'm not saying the Commanders finally have a kicker, but it sure does look like after all of that strife and after all of those dark and dismal days, the Commanders just may have a kicker. Okay? And I absolutely, listen, I told you all, I brought all the doom and gloom. And I appreciate David's comment here. I bring the doom and gloom, okay? But at least I can acknowledge when that dark cloud seems to have been lifted. And oh, what an irony that after all of that, I had even determined that I was no longer going to report on the kicking situation. I said, you know what? I'm not even going to do this, because people are going to start thinking, okay, all she talks about are things are negative. And I'm not a negative person at all. I want things to be positive. And 7 field goals. Now, of course, if there's 7 field goals, then you have to say, well, why weren't they all touchdowns? So we'll get to that later. But thank you, Austin Seibert, for your service, for your kicking ability, because wow. And I don't know if you all picked up on this, but it was so interesting. And this is up. We're already getting into something that, if you all watch the show, and if you're new here, we do say something called use your clues. And use your clues is basically, where was something either said or you saw something and you say, hey, this is coming up again. Well, guess what? I don't know if I did my due diligence in using my own clues. Let me tell you why. My Commanders media colleague from the Washington Post, Nikki Javala, asked head coach Dan Quinn after the game about where they found Austin Seibert, because now we have 2 Austins, right? So I have to, kicker Austin, because there's a running back Austin, so now there's kicker Austin. And Dan Quinn said, yes, we've seen him before. Matter of fact, you've seen him before too. He was one of the kickers at the Commanders-Jets joint practice on the Jet side, because they were having their own kicker competition. Now, here's the gag. It's like we were literally saying, oh, they have a kicking competition going on over there too. Who knew that none of us, now that's on us. That's on us now, okay? That is on us. To not realize that's one of the same guys that was kicking when the Commanders were over there struggling. We said, oh man, we sure do wish we had multiple kickers that can do that. Now, what do you know? Using your clues is for everybody. And everybody say hello to Darrell Owens, the man behind the lens. He knows and understands. You got to use these clues. And we all said, oh, he was with the Jets. And we all saw him there. I mean, not to make any excuses, but this is still in the episode. So this is what you all are going to always get from Bowie TV, and from me as well. Transparency, authenticity. Now, it was raining a lot that day, but of course, head coach Dan Quinn was right. And how funny is that? One of the kickers can't keep all the kickers, so they let him go. And now he's here. And let me just say this. We've been saying this for a long time. Having a kicker surely can make a difference. I mean, look across the league. We already know this in playoff time, but even during the regular season, we've already seen in the first 2 weeks of the NFL season where a field goal or an extra point has made the difference in the outcome of the football game. So, hey, Austin Seibert, welcome. I mean, I've already said that to him, but welcome again. And Bowie TV family, Coach from the Couch watchers, all drop in the chat a hello and a thank you to Austin Seibert. We'll make sure we share that with him so he sees that you all are appreciative and are saying hello, because that was something else. It really was. And I said, after all of this, got a kicker that made 7 field goals. Wow. It's something. And we see others have joined in the conversation. DJ Bland, Chief of DC, Eric Jessup. So let's just go ahead and get into the conversation. Now, one of the things that Darrell Owens does, he also helps me. You all see his fabulous pictures. You see all of that. You see all the great videos. He also helps me get organized with the video clips. And so at this point, I'm like, all right, we can just show just about everything because I'm pretty sure it's all relevant. Now, I think probably where we're going to start is sharing with you all last week. Darrell did a breakdown of all the things that the Commanders would need to do in order to beat the New York Giants. Now, we already know the outcome of the game, but as you are listening to this is about 5 minutes, okay? But we're going to do an activity. As you all are listening to this, drop in the chat if this what you saw from the Commanders. Let us know. I'm getting ready to play it, but make sure you all drop in the chat if this is what you all saw, just to get the commentary going, and then we're going to start the receipt pulling process. All right. So next up, check it out again, 5 minutes. And during that 5 minutes, guess what you can do? Share this show with your Washington Commanders loving family and friends. Check out Darrell's segment.
Hello, everyone. It's Darrell Owens, Bowie Television, and I'm here to break down this week's matchup between the Washington Commanders and the New York Football Giants. This matchup will prove to be a critical one for both teams. Both teams losing in their first week are looking to get their season started on a better foot here in week 2. Well, this is Washington's first home game of the year and the only home game that they have in the month of September. After this, they'll be on the road for 2 more games before they come back home. But let's talk a little bit first about the Giants and break the Giants down here. Obviously, they started their season off in a tough 28-6 loss to the Minnesota Vikings. It was not a good game for the Giants. They struggled throughout this contest, and it just never looked good at all. After this game, they are currently ranked 26th in offense in the NFL and 14th in defense. But those numbers really don't mean so much right now, especially with it being the beginning of the season. The Giants also are missing a big part of what they have been over the last 5-6 years, and that is Saquon Barkley, who is now a Philadelphia Eagle. They did draft Malik Neighbors with the 6th overall pick to try to boost that receiving core. But unfortunately, things just did not go their way in game 1. Now, Neighbors did have 5 receptions for 66 yards and had himself a pretty decent outing. But unfortunately, Daniel Jones had a really rough time, going 22 for 42 and only 186 yards passing, and he had 2 picks, no touchdowns whatsoever. But here's the thing that the New York Giants have over the Commanders. They are 8-2-1 in their last 11 games against Washington. All right, so the Commanders' 3 keys to victory. These are the 3 things I think the Commanders need to do in order to win their game on Sunday against the Giants. Number 1, keep Jaden Daniels' rushing attempts down. Last week, 16 attempts, 88 yards. Now, he did score 2 touchdowns, and he was the Pepsi Rookie of the Week because of his performance. But just like Coach Dan Quinn said earlier this week, he doesn't want Jaden to be running every opportunity or running as much as he did last week, this week. He wants Jaden to be in the pocket. He wants Jaden to be a passer. That's going to be critical for Washington to try to keep him upright, 1, but then 2, just to make sure he doesn't have to put himself in harm's way. Number 2, get Terry McLaurin and Brian Robinson going early and often. Now, Terry has been one of those curious cases because over the last couple of years, he still finds a way to get his numbers, but I feel like Terry could be a bigger part of this offense, and it just doesn't seem to ever really happen. Brian Robinson last week had a really good week. The numbers may not show it, but if you had a chance to see him just kind of do his thing last week and say to yourself, okay, if they can get that Brian Robinson cooking, the sky is the limit. And then number 3, harass Daniel Jones. Last week, Daniel Jones was sacked 5 times. He was hit 12 times overall. So that pressure, that harassment of Daniel Jones has to happen. Daniel Jones has had the Commanders' numbers, and he has been flawless for the most part against the Commanders. So they got to find a way to keep that pressure up on him. Daniel Jones has a lot on his mind. He's got a lot of expectation right now. He's got paid $45 million, and people want to see him out of New York, and he's got to prove that he is the guy there. But he's got a long road to get to that point. So, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, those guys on the defensive line have to, have to give Daniel Jones some fits on Sunday. Well, y'all, that's all I have on this one. It's going to be a interesting game. Now, I think the biggest thing overall in this contest is that the Commanders have to find a way to just get the monkey off their back. The Giants have had their number, and they've got to find a way to get the monkey off their back. Can they do that? Yes, they can. They have the talent on this team. And to me, if you ask me, I think up and down on the roster, I think the overall roster that the Commanders have a better roster. But can they put it all together and get a win on Sunday and give those Commanders fans something to smile about in their first home game of the season? We'll see. But for now, we're going to send you back to Candi so she can give you the rest of the breakdown and the insights to Sunday.
So I already saw a comment come through, and I said, all right, since we didn't necessarily get to the breakdown, let's reflect a moment, shall we? Because it's all still valid. So it gives us an opportunity to say, okay, Darrell has already said these were the keys. Now, if we reflect on those keys to the victory, while the Commanders got the victory, they did. And as my godmother's already said, a win is a win. And we're going to get to that as well. Okay, some of this still didn't look so hot. Keeping Jaden's rush attempts down. Okay, that was able, but go ahead, drop in the comments who had to take a deep breath, who had to wait a moment when Jaden laid down on the field for a moment and had to when he got the wind knocked out of him, because nobody really knew what was going on. We didn't know. I mean, we ended up being able to figure it out. Like, okay, he got the wind knocked out of him, but in that moment, drop in the chat how you really felt about that. Seriously, how did you really feel about it? Because if you were like me, I was like, here we go. Keeping the rush attempts down, still ran a bit much. Head coach Dan Quinn talked about that in the press conference today. Darrell's points about getting Terry McLaurin and Brian Robinson Jr. involved. Absolutely, Brian Robinson Jr., yes. Great day for B-Rob. I told many of you who asked me, should you pick up B-Rob on your fantasy football team? And I said, you better. So I hope that you did. Great job. Also, Austin Eckler. It may seem like, and I remember asking offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury about the running back room. Here's why. Because these two guys, while they're different, and Dan Quinn said that today, they're different. They have very unique skill sets that make them a very powerful duo. You saw that yet again. Also, drop in the chat if you just wanted to just, when that kick return at the beginning of the game by Austin Eckler had to come back due to a holding penalty. Oh my goodness. Whoo, because what a momentum downturn from that. B-Rob, Austin Eckler, yes. Terry McLaurin and the wide receiver group, still not so much. Now, what's interesting, wide receiver Noah Brown was active. You saw Noah make a couple of big plays. You said, okay, Noah. He made a couple. Much respect, but still not yet getting the ball to Terry McLaurin and others of the wide receiver groups. We'll get to that in a moment as well. Daniel Jones. I said just exactly what Darrell said. Everyone knows for years Daniel Jones has given this team fits. While it wasn't as bad, it was still not enough, in my opinion. I see this comment here, and I want to acknowledge it from DJ. I understand that Allen and Payne were being double teamed, but great players still perform despite double teams. This is something that we're gonna get into it. It's just after week 2, so we're gonna ease in there. We're gonna ease in there, but the Giants were wearing white. The tops were white, and Daniel Jones' jersey still wasn't dirty. I said he's got to be dirty. He's got to be a dusted up jersey, and it still wasn't. Still some explosive plays there from the Giants offense, which was concerning. So, yes, absolutely, they still won the football game, but some of these keys weren't all taken into consideration. So, I already see some comments here, and yes, we're going to get into the penalties for sure. But while we're talking about the wide receivers, receipt time, let's pull up a comment from last week's press conferences on the wide receiver group. Check it out.
Hey there, Coach, and I guess after a while I'll have to sing happy birthday too.
No chance of that, Candi.
But we've talked a lot about the wide receiver group throughout camp, and then in week 1, what did you see from that group overall?
You know, a number of things, and there'll be some plays that will not show up that we didn't hit on. There'll be some plays that were close. There was a screen early in the game that our timing just wasn't quite right, Candi, in terms of the ones to go. There was a shot at the start of the second half that we just missed on, and so the more time, the more plays in the game, the better. And so I like the group. These guys are a very competitive group all the way through. And I'm also excited to add Noah into that group. I've had some experience working with Noah. I know what he's about, what he stands for. So I'm hopeful that the trajectory will continue with him to get into that. But between OZ and Luke, of course, Terry being involved, that's a big deal for us too.
So I said, if you use your clues, I said last week when I asked this question, DQ made a mention of getting Noah involved, right? Using your clues. And Noah was active, definitely saw his involvement. So that was a good deal, because I said, if it's not, I'm still looking for more. I'm still waiting to see more. So from that group, let me be clear. But there was definitely a couple of plays that involved Noah Brown, and I didn't have any problem saying that I didn't have that on my bingo card for today. And it was a good deal. It wasn't a bad deal. It was a good one, but wanting to see more there. Now let's continue to go into some of these clips from last week, and we'll just get into the receipts. Where was this mentioned? What did it mean? How does it reflect once you hear the comment? How does it reflect on what you saw in the game week 2? So let's move on to another clip.
Before we do get started, I did want to acknowledge today and the history behind it being 9/11. And many times I weave something into football, and that's certainly not today. But for years I do teach on this day, and it weighs even heavier, being here in the DMV. Many of our players were actually too young to remember some of the extraordinary examples of bravery, and just a good day to remind us all, and do a little teaching on that. So what I try to explain to them is there are heroes among us every day, and that are all around us. But how could they know? They were 1 or 2, some of them 3 years old. And so just on this day, get to teach, but it weighs even more, being here in the DMV. So just wanted to acknowledge that, and let's get the day rocking and preparation for New York. Yep.
So a reason why I wanted to share that was because it was a reminder to myself of the age of the players. When Dan Quinn said that, I was like, wow. I guess many of the players, like you said, were too young. There might be a couple that may not have even been born yet, right? So it was just a moment of perspective of just the difference in age. And when we think about the difference in age, we have to think about, like, even when I'm analyzing the game or thinking about accountability measures, right? How to keep the players accountable for penalties, missed tackles, busted coverages, whatever the case may be. What may have historically resonated in my age demographic, or maybe someone else's age demographic, may not resonate with some in this group. So it is important to keep that perspective of understanding and knowing the different learning styles and the different experiences, because Dan Quinn is right. I mean, what that day meant to so many of us, these players, it may not resonate at all. And so I was able then to take that example and say, you know what, the same thing could go for some of the issues and the challenges. How do they make that resonate? How can they have teachable moments? Because you can't just say it was this way when we came up, or this is how we learned it. No, everybody's different. Multitude of different learning styles and ways to do things. So I took that example and said, you know what, I have to continue to remember that this is a different demographic. It's a different time. So I just thought that was important. It helps me to just, again, have perspective and understand that things are different now. Not that they can't learn something, but it's just what could have worked for me or others may not work for some of them. Thought that was important. Now, let's move on to this next clip. Before we move on, if you've just tuned in, you are watching from the Coaching from the Couch series, the Washington Commanders Update. I am your host, Candi CWall Waller. This is Bowie Television. We're doing a live recording of this. So if you're watching on TV, hello, and you all make sure you're subscribed, make sure you're hitting that love and like button, and make sure you're sharing this show with all of your Washington Commanders loving family and friends. Now, let's move on to the next clip.
And what have you been able to kind of take away from Malik Neighbors in one full game of regular season tape?
Well, I've seen him, not just this, one game, but he's just a really talented young man that can stretch the field. He can get in and out of breaks. He can bend. Has a really good catch radius. So I'm just, he's a good player. He's going to be a challenge.
So we're going to probably play another one of Coach Witt's. We're going to go back and forth with some of the clips from the coordinators and Dan Quinn as well. Malik Neighbors, that was something, right? Admittedly, right? Coach Witt said he's going to be a challenge, and he absolutely was a challenge. And some of you definitely dropped in the chat if you said, well, for all of this, why didn't Emmanuel Forbes just play? He could have waited another week or two to have his thumb procedure, because maybe it would have been a little bit better than what everyone saw in the secondary. Here's the thing that is important to note, and I hope you all noted this as well. Some of the same issues, Emmanuel Forbes being there or not, and this is in no way taken up for Forbes or anybody. What I will say, the issues were consistent, whether he was out there or not. Issues with the secondary from Tampa Bay week 1 and some of what was seen in week 2. Now I'm also going to say this, because some of the issues that we've seen as well are recurring. So this isn't like new. There's been miscommunications in the secondary for a few years now. Certain things is going on. So now I'm starting to pay attention in a way where it's like, okay, yes, it's a new team, but in some instances, it's the same old problems. So that is something important to note. Use your clues, folks, and keep it documented. Because a lot of the things that we're discussing and talking about, the issues, think about some of the issues you've already dropped in the chat. Think about the things that you saw in week 2 and in week 1. These aren't new. These are recurring, although it's a new team. So that is going to be intriguing as time goes on, and how it's tracked and how it is basically alleviated, or how do you get rid of it? I've been talking about this for a while, right? The merging of two different cultures. Because now, like I said, you're seeing the same problems. Some of these discussions aren't new. So keep that in mind while we move on to the next clip.
And for the veteran leaders on the team, how active in communication overall have they been since the loss on Sunday?
I think a lot of it by action of what you see. First off, I was referring to what I saw Tuesday, what I saw this morning of early arrivals, early meetings, player-led. And I do like to push those guys to develop them, not just because they're leaders on the team. A lot of these guys are going to be leaders in their lives, past football. And so the leadership here, does it get put down to the team? You bet. But the more leaders we develop here, not only is it going to help our team, it's going to help them in the long run. So there are some really significant leaders here that are finding their voice, finding how to lead, and I'm going to push the hell out of that.
I think it is very important to note that Dan Quinn shared with all of us that some of the ways where he saw the leaders really stepping up after that week 1 loss is that he saw player-led meetings. Write that in your notebook. Write that in the use your clues, because I do think that is very important when players are coming together and they weren't told to do so and they were player-led. So positive note, a good thing. Now let's move on to defensive coordinator Joe Witt's opener from last week. Check it out.
Season, the way that we wanted to start it, a lot of our ills came from the inability to get off the field on third down. There's 3 major reasons that happened. The first one, losing leverage in certain situations. Then, the times we did get to the quarterback, we didn't get them down. And then we had some communication issues. And all those areas, it's my responsibility to make sure that they don't happen. So from a leverage, I got to make sure that they understand the leverage the defense that we call in the scheme. We get to the quarterback, we got to drill it better to make sure that when we hit him, hey, he goes down, he doesn't scramble and escapes and finds people. And then any communication errors, like I've said from the jump, it's our jobs as coaches to make sure that the players are not thinking they're playing fast and they're on the same page. So our inability to get off the field, we didn't create any turnovers. We had a real opportunity at one. We have to make those splash plays when we have them. And then towards the end of the game, I just didn't feel the speed that we talked about as much, and that's our responsibility to make sure we do a great job of rotating. We said we're going to roll with a deep crew, and we have to do that. And so, going from week 1 to week 2, transitioning to New York, once again, you have another high pedigree quarterback, a guy that can really create with his feet, get outside the pocket and make you have to worry about him running and throwing the football. You look on the outside, they have real speed on the outside, a number of guys that can take the top off the coverage. 17 in the slot, he's just really, really good. They use him in the backfield, multiple ways, trying to fill some of that with Saquon left. Okay, they have a really good left tackle that can block anybody in the league. So once again, we have our work cut out for us, and we have to make sure that we do our job, okay? We make sure that we communicate at a high level, that we run and hit, that when we have opportunity to make the plays, we make the plays. So, it wasn't the way that we wanted to start, and I'm not going to get into, it's one game out of 17. You only have 17 opportunities, and we can't waste any opportunities. And so, let's let teams beat us. Let's not beat ourselves. And so, we worked hard this week to get it corrected, and that's what we're doing.
So I already saw one comment in the chat by Mike Lyles saying that he saw the opposite of speed. So you all drop in the chat. Did you see a difference from week 1 to week 2? Now, in some instances, and we will get there momentarily, but I know I shared and posted on my page that Frankie Louvu, sure enough, did take his game captain responsibilities seriously, because the energy that he brought to Northwest Stadium with him goes without saying. I thought it was great. I thought it was great. And, that is one of the players off-season free agent signing that I've been talking about. So I definitely thought it was important to note Frankie. I do think, week one, I was for certain, and you all know I mentioned this about, players that didn't play in the preseason. So, 3 of those players that were not injured, that didn't play, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, and Bobby Wagner. And I think definitely from week 1 to week 2, I saw a difference in Bobby Wagner for sure. And I mentioned that on my pages. And I think if I'm not mistaken, in watching Bobby Wagner in recent years, he really gets going about mid-season. So I definitely wanted to note that. But in terms of just the overall defense, again, I had already mentioned the miscommunication in the secondary was still there. Okay, that was still there. And so I still didn't feel it. Going back to the point of Daniel Jones' jersey wasn't all that dirty. And so I still think that that's something to be mentioning. What is said here, which I think is important, is about Benjamin St-Juste, right? Week 1, there wasn't any takeaways. They had a takeaway this week. A forced fumble by Benjamin St-Juste, recovered by safety Jeremy Chin. I thought that was important. I did think that was important. I said, you know what? Benjamin was on it. Last week, I shared a clip because I thought it was an important point, using your clues. When my Commanders media colleague, Sam Fortier, asked Dan Quinn last week about Benjamin St-Juste. And he said what he really likes about Benjamin is that he's able to recall what he did wrong. The issue is when a player can't tell you what happened. Benjamin can tell you what happened and already get into what he needed to do to correct it. So I'm okay when I see progress. When I see progress, I'm okay. And at that time in the game, week 2, the defense needed to do something. They needed to do something because I saw a comment come through, I think from Chris Howell, that said they were a little better on third down, but I'm like, they just still wasn't enough for me. And for, in terms of pressure, sacks, getting to the quarterback. We're going to get to Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne in a moment, but it's still one of these things that I will say here. And this is what I just mentioned. Barring any injury, in the recent years that I've watched Bobby Wagner play, he normally warms up. He gets warm, right? He gets into it because he didn't play in the preseason, but he started getting warm because yesterday a couple times I was like, oh, Bobby's almost back, everybody. Right around 4 or 5 weeks, but he's also like 30-something. Is a linebacker. He has played at this level for a very long time. I should probably know how old he is, like 32, 33, 34. Playing at that level. But that is why you couple him with the Frankie Louvu. And that is why you have Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne, so that everybody can perform accordingly, because then it shouldn't be all on him considering his age. I mean, he's been in the league over a decade, playing at the highest level every single year. So I said that to say each week he gets a little warm. You'll see flashes for sure, but consistently 60 minutes, I don't know. But when you have other big names, and the expectation, right, is that everybody is doing their part. So we'll have to talk about if everybody is doing their part. Because as far as I'm concerned, if everybody's doing their part at least 75% of the time, you're going to get a little bit more traction than what we've been seeing. So, all right. Let me see what I want to jump to. Because I want to jump to some Cliff Kingsbury clips from last week. Let's go there.
Been made about the 16 carries. I mean, how do you guys read that? I mean, it's all game circumstance, but how do you sort of interpret it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple calls, where we thought we had premier looks that ended up hitting inside that you'd like to have back. If he walks in, then it looks really good. But a lot of those, he did a great job. I'm not sure how many actually got contacted and taken to the ground on, but he does a great job finding the soft spot, finding out of bounds. But we understand, like, he has to take care of himself, and we want him to continue to grow, and you can't do that if you're banged up and on the sideline.
I want to acknowledge this comment here. Okay? Because I think it's a very important point. And I know that, I'm seeing all kinds of stuff already across the NFL where it's like people are panicking all over the league over their teams. And it is week 2, everybody. Like week 2. But in this case, in the Washington Commanders case, it is week 2 of a new team. And you cannot turn over a roster in 6 months. Really? Is it really 6 months? Really? Well, yeah, it's probably about 6 months now. 6 months now. You cannot turn over a whole team in 6 months by week 2. Now that is what is important to continue to stress. When I have continuously said on this show and in other platforms, if this team wins 7 games, that is an extraordinary season. They have done very well. What does that mean when I say that? It means that in this season, 7 games is the ceiling, not the floor. All right? It's the ceiling is 7. That's the most. Okay? Not the least. It's the most. So, some areas you got to show some grace and some growing pains. However, there's some other areas. So when everybody's like, where's Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne? I agree with you. I absolutely agree with that comment. For certain. Others as well. It's like, well, what's going on with that? I agree with you. And where you will see me get, oh my goodness, is when we start talking about the penalties, because I started sharing with you all and started asking questions about the penalties in July, because that was a consistent issue in practice. Consistent. So now I'm seeing issues that were in July. Now in September, and that is an issue because that shows a discipline problem. Now, when we start talking about talent, you got to think about it like this. Adam Peters and his scouts and his player personnel, they haven't had a full season together. They haven't gone through a full evaluation scouting season together. That started this year. That started now. So you can't expect the talent level. You just can't. And it's also unfair to expect it, quite frankly. For some of these people, you knew who they were when it got started. You did. We all did. All right. Anyone that's new, okay, waiting for you to settle in, but it's still got to gel as a team. As I saw that comment as well, it's still got to gel as a team. But if someone says, where's Deron Payne and John, I'm going to be like, I agree with that. And so some of this is not necessarily a wait and see, because even with that, I think if they play at their maximum level, you can still see a difference in that role. You really could. You really, really could. I also want to mention, I've seen a lot of conversations about Cliff Kingsbury. Now, one thing I'll say with the red zone challenges, I definitely was saying in the press box, well, why they just give the ball to B-Rob? Give it to Austin. Get B-Rob in there. Just get him in there. Don't even throw the ball. Just get B-Rob in there. He's hot. Get him in there, right? That was, and I know even for myself, going back to tempering expectations, because I'm looking for creativity. At this point, guess what? It doesn't have to be flashy. It doesn't have to be creative. It just needs to be effective. It just needs to work. That's all. And once you find something that is working, you need to stick with it. Stick with it until the defense says, and the defense makes you adjust. Once the defense, if it's working, roll with it. The defense makes you adjust, okay, adjust. But other than that, wear them out. I was happy to see the connections with Zach Ertz because that is something that we've consistently seen all summer. That is why Jaden Daniels called him a security blanket. He's been doing that all summer. Use them. Roll with it. The reason why I was saying, pick up B-Rob on your fantasy football team, folks, is because what you're seeing, we've seen him do that all summer. But in that same regard, those penalties, we've been seeing that all summer too. So while the team is showing undisciplined nature with these penalties, we're going to get into that in a minute because it's very important. It is a very important point. I do appreciate Coach Joe Witt saying, as coaches, it is our responsibility. But at what point does responsibility and then accountability come into place? So we're just, because these weren't, let me just say this. The Giants are bad. Giants are not good at all right now, at all. When you think about not converting in the red zone that many times, I'm like, so wait a minute. All you got to do is the math, right, y'all? So that means this team could have scored close to 50 points. I mean, I'm glad they won. I'm not complaining. But when you look at the point difference, something that needs to be noted and kept in your use your clues and your books because it's very, 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 very important. Now, let's move because I know it's Monday Night Football. You all are still hanging with me. Love button, fire emoji. I appreciate you all so much. If you're just tuning in, you're watching from the Coaching from the Couch series, the Washington Commanders Update. I'm your host, Candi CWall Waller, and we're pulling receipts. No, seriously, we're recapping all the things from week 2, game preparation for the New York Football Giants and the actual game. Let's move on to another clip.
Along those lines with the rookie.
Oh, what did I open a can of worms up here? I blame you, Sean.
With Jaden, with Mike, and all those guys, the young guys especially, when you're watching some of the mistakes they made, how much do you say, well, this is a rookie mistake versus this is something you should know about?
Yeah, I don't use the word rookie mistake, Sean. I'm glad you brought that up because it's a mistake. But I would say this, because it doesn't have to be just, sometimes just a second-year guy. Or, experience. Now, the reason I say that is because you do have to fight your way through some of those problems because you have to be in there to make them. And it does hurt a little more early as these guys are developing into it. But you have faith that it's going to turn, and then by the second half of the season, you're not easing somebody in because they've gone through that. And by that time, they've got 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, and now it's changing. And so you do have to fight through it. I've always been fully committed to that, to knowing that some errors are going to happen. You don't want you to have to make one, and then Nikki to have to make one, and then Candi to have to make the same one. So we got to learn from them. But I'm fully confident that I know what it looks like also, that you make some and you don't repeat those, and then the ball player keeps improving and improving. And it's like, man, for somebody that may watch end of the year think, how'd that happen? And it's like, no. All of us in here, we saw the whole thing going and taking off. So that's where I got. Okay, see ya.
So that was at the end of the press conference on Friday. And we're going to get into the penalties because I don't know if you all can notice, but that's a bit of a sore spot for myself. I'll be honest with you. And the reason why it's a sore spot for myself is because I will continue to say it. I'll continue to repeat myself. Hey, listen, if I saw it in July, I probably shouldn't see it in September. So that is worrisome. I think it's really worrisome. Now, it becomes, listen, and everybody, listen, I'm saying 7 wins. That's based on what I'm saying. And that's based on what I saw all summer since May. And I'm responding to this comment here. tempering expectations is so important. But that does not mean anybody is going to do anything to intentionally lose. Now, these self-inflicted wounds with these penalties, and they saw less missed tackles in week 2 than in week 1, but yet still present for sure, for certain. There's definitely just some fundamental things that should be cleaned up that could truly have put the team in a much better position. That's the key. I'm going to always hey, if they end up winning 10, they're going to be like, CWall said they go good, because I want people to keep their expectations low. Now, for some players, because I'm getting ready to get into this scrum that we had with Jonathan Allen on Friday, I do think the appearance of those players need to happen. If Terry McLaurin is your number one, get your number one to football. Make some plays with the number one. Period. If your guys on D-line, your top payers, get them. They need to start making their presence known. Now, perhaps everybody is easing into it because, hey, listen, when these guys talk, let me be very clear. When they talk, from coaching staff to players, they're talking about playing into January and February. They are. So I'm like, hey, listen, please, by all means, this 7, who am I? I'm just there and I'm watching. But it is so important to temper your expectations. I made a comment and I stand by this. And it is, I think my concern so far is that my biggest concern, one concern is that the tried and true leaders that have been on this roster, they need to rise to the occasion. So yes, when it comes to Cliff Kingsbury play calling, if you can't get the ball down the field or you got to do short yardage, okay, fine. But get Terry, if that's your number one, get all your number ones, get them involved. B-Rob, Zach Ertz, Terry McLaurin. Get them involved and get everybody else involved too. If they start getting double teamed, okay, that's when you use Noah. That's when you know you still got Austin. You could do other things, but your number ones, get them involved. Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, absolutely get to the quarterback, get them down on the ground. 3 and out, let's go. Get the offense to football back. Holding penalties, what have you, on special teams can hurt, as we all saw. Right? But limiting those as much as possible as well. But these pre-snap penalties, it's hard to really dive into play calling when you have undisciplined mistakes. They get that in order. And I think we'll all already watch an improved team, right? Because missed tackles and just those pre-snap penalties, as Dan Quinn has continuously said, it just cannot be a part of what they do. That right there, that's because that blows your play call anyway. You're getting a penalty or you missed the tackle, that's going to blow your play call anyway. It's going to blow it. If you could have been in position and then missed the tackle. What are we doing here? So get that right. And you shouldn't even get it right because it's a fundamental thing. Just do it. And then we can start saying, okay, wait a minute now. That play call is off. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. When it's like, wait a minute, stuff that we were seeing in July should not be seeing it in September. Not at all. Let me get into this scrum with Jonathan Allen. Check this out.
We got to remind them. We're looking forward to it.
What specific things do you want to see?
I just want to see us fly around. Start with myself. Got to finish the plays that we have there, and we got to execute.
You guys, for whatever reason, had not a lot of success against the Giants and Daniel Jones when he played. Any reason as to why? What do you think might be different with Dan Quinn? Because he's had a lot of success with Dallas in recent years.
You know, one thing I try not to do is try not to bring years past into the previous year, because every year is different, So, they definitely had success against us in the past, but it's a new year, new team, and we're looking forward to going out there and putting on a good show.
Do you see any big difference in Daniel Quinn back from his injury?
Hard to tell. I mean, I think which is interesting. I think that his running ability will be affected a little more, but he's still able to move rather well. So as of right now, after 1 week, I want to say not too much.
You're wearing your Alabama sweatshirt. I know you were old, but there seems to be a national debate about what Tua should do about his career and his body. I'm just wondering, from a player's perspective, what's that like to hear all these people coming in and telling you what to do and what the right thing to do is?
It's tough because obviously your health should be number one, but it's also difficult because this is something we've been doing since 7 years old. You know what I mean? And it's a lot easier to say that someone should retire than for someone who's been doing this their whole life and just to give it all up. So I mean, obviously, if it was me, I don't know what I'd do. Honestly, I'm stubborn, so I probably would try to play through it, but I can't make that decision for him. That's something him and his family got to sit down and talk about, and it's easy for us to give our opinion when we're not in that situation. So, I'm just praying for him. I wish him the best, and you just hate to see it happen such a good day.
So, Jonathan, another home opener with you leading the team, or was one of the leaders of the team. So, how do you feel?
I'm excited. I'm so ready to get out here and play in front of the in front of the stand, in front of the fans, and really just get a good start to what we want to be a good season for us.
So last week was a little tough. So what were some of the lessons learned for you specifically after last week's loss?
I would just say finish. It's frustrating when you have your opportunity and you don't take advantage of them. So for me, I just got to finish the plays that I get. The D-line has to finish the plays that we get. And as a defense and as a team, we got to finish when the opportunity is there.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. So, do you all think that Jonathan Allen was be able to finish? Is that what you thought based on what you saw? Of course. I think that we just want to hear their names more. You want to see them more. You want to see in impact plays and moments. Next week against a very frustrated Cincinnati Bengals team is going to be rough. Okay, Monday Night Football, that's going to be rough because that Bengals team seems like they're out for blood right now. They're desperate for a win. So we'll have to see what happens. But I do think that when I asked Jonathan about specifically for himself, what is his lessons learned? And he said he just got to finish. He needs to finish. So let's see, because I want to know for you, right? He gives the pregame speeches, all of those things. What do you need to do? What have you learned? Let's see what happens, because I'm gonna tell you, we're gonna already kind of move to Cincinnati, but I'm gonna make this comment. They're gonna have to finish with Cincinnati because we could already note and tell that is not a team that's trying to go down 0-3. They are, especially after how they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs, they were very frustrated. Very, 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 very frustrated. So let's move into, we've done a whole recap of just the preparation from the week and being able to reflect and take a look and say, okay, based on what you saw, does this resonate? Does it make sense? And I know that Monday Night Football is going on, but I still have some more clips from today's press conference with head coach Dan Quinn that I absolutely want to get into, because there's some very important points in here about the pre and post snap penalties, Jaden throwing too quickly, the no huddle pre-snap penalties, why Jamin Davis was a healthy scratch, and week 2 notable players that I want to make sure you all hear. So let's go ahead and get into each one of these clips.
I'll get started here, regarding from yesterday. What I told the players today, that the best teams don't need losses to learn the lessons. And they learn all the intended lessons in the wins too. And I do believe that so much of the first month of the NFL season is about who can learn the lessons the fastest. And we'll definitely be a team that will improve week to week. And we're definitely on to Cincinnati, but we need to stay on us for a minute and make sure, although we're a new team, that's learning, but we can't have mistakes that repeat, in a week or another week. So those are really important topics for us to continue to improve.
So, hey, there it is right there. There it is right there. Dan Quinn said, hey, but look, we can't have mistakes. They repeat. week after week. So there's your signal. Use your clues, write it down. Week 2, after the week 2 press conference, right? Recapping the game, can't have mistakes that repeat. Use your clues, write it down. That means it should be okay to be very critical when you see mistakes that repeat. Moving on to the next clip.
I know you've talked quite a bit about the pre and post snap penalties.
Yes.
But are you able to put your finger on why the false starts in particular keep popping up, and how do you go about fixing something like that?
Yeah, those are the ones. So I would call like the pre and post snap ones, like they'll fall under discipline, Nikki. And those are the ones that we have to get rid of, because there could be a check at the line of scrimmage and you jumped, like, hey man, like we're going to get into the best play, have the discipline to stay in it. Like most things, more practice at it for sure. Even if you have to check in and out of a play that you don't need to for that simple purpose of doing it right. More often I found the false starts are, I'm wanting to go too quickly. I'm just get the check, get to the call to go. I can live. You don't want them, but I can live with the combative ones. I can live with a holding or a DPI. I didn't like the one on Nick on the opening kickoff, but when you're trying to be physical, that part I can live with. The pre and the post snap ones, that's a no bueno for me. So we'll really, kind of focus in on that. The false starts were the ones that set us back in this game from a penalty point of view.
Write it down in your book, in your notebook under use your clues. DQ said that's a no bueno for me. And he looks like he means it. Very nice man, but I think he means it in week 2, because he kind of said it last week, but he's kind of like, but week 2, I think he's kind of like, don't like it. So write it in your book, because it's written about 53 times in mine. All right. So let's move on to the next clip, because listen, and let me say this. Those penalties were a problem. Okay. I'm play calling, all of that. I get it. I do. And there was definitely some times where I'm like, why you just didn't keep just keep feeding Brian. He's got it. He can do it. If you don't give it to him, give it to Austin. The run game is working. So work it. For sure, right? And I'm still standing on Terry's your number 1 receiver. Get your number 1 receiver the football. As many times as you need to try it out, give it a shot. But those penalties took me out. It really took me down. And I was just, because this is just like crazy now. Like it was really unreal. I mean, 7 in the red zone. Come on, you all. That's a bit much, especially when you really think about the point difference. Way too many. Let's move on to the next clip.
Was it intentional to have Jaden throw really quickly, a lot of horizontal routes, like before the year, or is it just how it's kind of worked out these last 2 games?
Yeah, I think as you're going through it, Sam, like we're still learning too, and Jaden's just going into his second game. We had some ones down the field that we would have liked to have seen him take. Some of the ones even on the scrambles to remain a passer as you're coming closer towards the line of scrimmage to throw it down the field. You're probably referring to some of the RPOs that would have worked in there. One of the things I did like about, the way that we did able to control the possession of the ball. I think there was probably 35 runs and 23 completions. And if you're 55, 56, I think we ended up being like 58, somewhere in that neighborhood, Sam. What then happens is time of possession, now can become a factor, more plays. And so although we missed the mark in the red zone, I was pleased to see us, taking care of the ball and having long extended drives. So we didn't punt. We kicked a hell of a lot, which, trust me, after what this team's been through, like I'm not bitching about making field goals. Okay. But, I will say that, the completion, the poise of Jaden and putting the ball at the right spot, that's a really big deal. And I think the more we play, like we are still a new team together, the more reps, the more game experience that we get, these are really valuable like times for us. And so the games are so important, not just because of the win-loss, but like how we want to play. So I just kind of anticipate us continuing this trajectory upwards.
And shout out to my Commanders media colleague from the Washington Post, Sam Fortier, for asking that question. Nikki Javala was first on the pre and post snap penalties. This next one up is Sam Fortier as well. And then my two questions from today, I will play those clips and we will get into those as well. And those are why Jamin Davis was a healthy scratch and Dan Quinn's week 2 notable players.
Kind of to that point, what did you think of the pre-snap communication, especially when you guys went no huddle? And because I know a couple of the false starts were when you guys went no huddle. Was that an influencing factor there? And I guess what did you think of the progress in that area?
I felt like coaches and players did a good job communicating. That was one of the things, if you remember from last week, that I spent a lot of time on to say, I want that part in game to be better. You're correct that 2 of the false starts were, checking a play, going from one to another potentially, and that is part of what we do. So the more discipline, the more that we can practice it, the better we'll get at it. And so doing it in the game-like environments, with noise, without noise, all of those, we'll continue to do that because there's a lot that we want to work on, but that in specific, the pre-snap, like making sure we get that right, that's really important, and we're going to work our ass off to get that right.
And we're going to hold Dan Quinn and the team to that, aren't we, you all? Next up, my 2 questions. I know that some folks saw the inactive list and said, whoa, Jamin Davis is inactive. So yes, had that on my list of questions to ask DQ today.
Good afternoon, Coach. Jamin Davis was a healthy scratch yesterday. Just a little insight on the decision to make him inactive yesterday.
You got it, Candi. We actually put up 5 defensive tackles. We knew we were going to have like a pitch count, so to speak, on Johnny Newton. And so we felt with him 12 to 15 reps for his first game, we needed an extra big guy in the rotation for that game. So it was more by design. If Johnny was going to be up, then we were going to add an extra practice squad player up to have 5 defensive tackles as opposed to 5 DNs based on the limited playing time for Johnny. So that was by design.
And now on to my next question.
Okay, and after watching the film, I know you've talked about the running backs and, of course, the 7 field goals, but who else really stood out to you in yesterday's game?
I thought I'll give you two things. One is the first one, I would say, Zach Ertz. I thought he just made some impactful plays in this game. He's thoughtful. He knows how to get open. He can find the spots in the zones. He made some big plays for us. And then the other spot is on defense. And I thought Wagner and Luvu looked like a pair of linebackers that were square. They tackled. They blitzed. They just felt like they were in connection and concert together, Candi. And so those two, I really felt Frankie's physicality. There was a big hit early on one of the plays to Neighbors on the very first drive that he had a long catch and run, and you just saw Frankie hauling ass and going to get into the tackle. But he brings a lot of energy, not just to this team, but to the entire building. I love that, what he does. And then Bobby, I just felt him square and tackling, and that was, what we need from him, and he absolutely delivered. So those would be the 3 that I would point out to in the game.
So I said it at the top of the show or toward the earlier part of the show. We've been on now for a little over an hour, so thank you all for tuning in. But I said during the summer, I said, you know what? Once Frankie and Bobby start cranking, listen, those are 2 linebackers right there that I would not want to run up on me on game day. They're kind of scary out there on the field. And yes, while it may feel like, okay, Bobby Wagner lost a step, barring any injury, roll with me on this one. I think he gets warmed up a little mid-season anyway. But Frankie Luvu, and that's one of the things that's one of the players I've been talking about is Frankie Luvu, and he was one of the game captains, and He showed up again, Zach Ertz, vintage Zach Ertz. Titled the security blanket. When it's time to make it move, when it's time to strong arm somebody like he did with that defender to keep that football, I said, oh, in the press box, I said, oh, Zach Ertz just yanked that ball back like, oh, I'm a grown man out here. What you're not going to do is think you're going to take this football from me. It's not happening. So I did feel the energy shift from week 1 to week 2. I do think that I felt a sense of urgency from the team, that it was very, very important to win this football game. New all the way around, new stadium name, the new owners, new GM, new head coach, new quarterback, just so much newness while there's still some returning. It was important. And shout out to the fans. Sometimes you go to the games, not sometimes, a lot of the times, and there's way more of the opposing team fans than there are of the home team. And let me tell you something, Commanders fans, you showed up and you showed out at Northwest Stadium. And I am probably more happy that the team won for the fans and the fans being there, because for a split second there, I was like, this cannot happen, because this Giants team is not good. And if this team loses, I know that we're saying temper your expectations. We're saying all the right things. All of the signs are there to just temper and give it time and be patient. But people are just not going to do that. They're just not going to do that. And and I'm still saying temper your expectations. But against a bad Giants team at home on a beautiful weather Sunday, it was a good day for football. And it was a good day for the Commanders fans, because you all definitely showed up really big. And I think that there was a sigh of relief, but I don't know about you all in watching and looking at Dan Quinn on the Zoom today. It's business. He's still in business mode, right? And as he shared with us through the press conference, it's still Tell the Truth Monday, whether you win or lose, because there's still some things that need to be fixed, right? So week 2, a win. The Commanders are 1-1. They will go and see Joe Burrow in the Cincinnati Bengals next Monday in Cincinnati. And that's a team that is desperate for a win. They were fired up, the Cincinnati Bengals, losing to the Kansas City Chiefs by 1 point, I believe, by a field goal. But I think that field goal put the Chiefs up 1 point. And they're going to be itching for a win. You talk about hunting and seek and destroy. That is a football team that is not going to, they are going to be relentless trying to get a win on Monday Night Football. So let's see if there's progress. And you've all heard me say this in years past, not looking for perfection, looking for progress. So let's see if there's progress. And who knows? Maybe we'll have something pleasant to talk about again. So I will try to check back in, you all, and do another show in preparation for Monday Night Football, and just chime in on what we're seeing across the league and what's really interesting, what's really standing out based on the opponents that the Commanders have on the schedule this season. Kind of already got to get into some NFC East talk. Let's see what we're seeing so far in the division, and then, like I said, from the others that the other teams that are on the schedule for this year, because this is only week 2. But I'm telling you, this has already been like, whoa, Who would have thought that would have happened? And it's just week 2. So you all listen. Thank you as always for tuning in. This is the Coaching from the Couch series, the Washington Commanders update. I am your host, Candi CWall Waller. This is Bowie Television, and I will be seeing you all again soon.